Alright, anyways, Elden Ring's DLC bosses could be insane. Let's see what this is all about. Oh, same, Bridges. I loved that. I mean, I love everything with Galadriel in it because she's so badass. But anyways, here we go.
Alright, what's going on, guys? In light of Elden Ring's DLC announcement, we've entered into a time of wonder and speculation based off of one singular image that really doesn't tell us a whole lot of concrete information, but paints enough of a picture of a concept to keep us occupied with ideas, imagining what a continuation of Elden Ring's story would look like, and that's what we're gonna do today. But rather than discussing major story points and going off completely unfounded speculation, I want to take the things we do know, specifically the characters and potential boss fights, and imagine what they would look like if they were put in the DLC, because believe it or not, there are some extremely interesting concepts and character storylines that Elden Ring has left open-ended just enough to potentially make a comeback in DLC.
That's
and I
true.
think you guys are really gonna like some of the stuff here. So if you're
Well, I'm thinking that they're probably gonna do something with Miquella. What? And I'm wondering if that's gonna bring in stuff with like Lady Trina. And then there's also the Glowmide Queen. You know? Like there's a few things that they could do, and I'm sure there's much more that I don't even know. I really do think that it is Miquella and Torrent, and just based off of the Miquella video that we watched before, I'm pretty sure that Miquella is going to be a big part, which is kind of sad.
you're excited about Elden Ring's DLC and want to stay up to date on all the latest news and conversation, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button and help the channel get to 100k. But with all that, let's go ahead and dive into it. To organize this video, I want to start off with what I believe is going to be the most likely, and then work our way down to the wildest and most unlikely boss fight that we have on this list. But let's begin with a little bit of background and briefly clarify where we stand on the breakdown of this DLC image and what exactly we're looking at here to build the framework of this list. Now, we've made 2 videos breaking down about everything we can within the image of Shadow of the Erdtree, and our interpretations were as follows: that the DLC is likely going to revolve around the story of Miquella and his journey to re-establish the Order of Death through
Marika? What about Marika?
evolving or replacing the Erdtree. And we have some areas of importance in this image, such as the Erdtree being consumed by another tree that does appear to resemble Deathroot, and the Erdtree leaking gold, being drained of its color. And we also see all the spirit graves around the area in a field of wheat, reminiscent of Miquella's Age of Abundance.
You know what these remind me a lot of? They remind me a lot of the Kodamas from Princess Mononoke. Melina? Wait, what is happening? I don't know.
And based off much of the loose lore we have throughout the game, we also believe that this DLC is either going to take place in the spirit world or a dream world, going off the lore of Miquella's alter ego, Saint Trina. And so with these parameters in place, let's discuss the potential bosses. Likely the most obvious on this list, the boss fight I want to begin with today is a potential Miquella fight. Now, based on Miquella's character, it's likely that throughout the DLC he'll be an ally of the Tarnished, given that his goal is to establish a new order, and we are the best suited instrument for that to happen. However, the youthful and childlike Miquella that we see in the DLC image is not the one we can currently find at this stage of the Lands Between. Miquella, as we know according to our lore, cocooned himself within the Halig tree, giving his blood as the water by which to make the tree grow. However, this cocoon was stolen by Mohg and now rests atop a giant pelvic bone in the Mohgwyn Palace, where the blood that runs through Miquella is now a tainted curse. Now, it's obvious this form we see Miquella in is not what was intended to hatch from the cocoon, as seen in the intro cutscene. Here we can see a very different Miquella. He's both the same size and has the same hair that we can see in the DLC image, but beyond that, he appears to be covered in some sort of webbing, with these pellucid insect wings protruding out of his back. Now, we noticed a long time ago that many of these attributes are very similar to those of a silk moth, which grows from a silkworm in a cocoon almost exactly the same as what we can see Miquella in. And this would make sense considering that Miquella in this intro cutscene seen appears to be in the mid-stage of the metamorphosis, where he's in a sort of fetal position, just beginning to grow the features of the moth. We can also find many smaller cocoons around the Halig tree, and so here's what this suggests to me, that if we do have a Miquella boss fight in the DLC, there's a good chance that he'll take the form of a giant silk moth, much like how Melania takes a butterfly form in her second stage. Or perhaps it'll be some eldritch corrupted form of a silk moth, given that Miquella's fate that we can see in the game didn't go exactly as planned. Up next is one that I'm really hoping happens in the DLC, and if we're thinking along the correct lines, then I do think it has a great chance of taking place. And that is a fight with Godwyn, at least in some capacity. We know,
maybe
as
his body,
told in the lore of Castle Sol, that Godwyn and Miquella were comrades, and it's implied that Miquella was working to revive Godwyn, to allow him to have a proper death. And this would be achieved through an eclipse where the sun is drained of its color, but we don't get many details beyond that. But if we were to run into Godwyn in this DLC, then what would he be like? Well, like Miquella, we have some very specific imagery to go off of. As I mentioned earlier, the tree that we can see coiling around the Erd tree appears to very closely...
Oh, so you think that maybe this could be Godwyn? Because Godwyn is spreading all throughout the lands between with his death root and everything. What if those roots form a tree? What if all the roots are firmly planted into the ground and then he releases a tree from his body that ensnares the Erd tree? Hey, Shadow Steel. Oh my god, Bridges, that sounds awful. No thanks. I think that that's plausible. I mean, obviously it's all speculation, and I think he's got a really good point here with that. I think that there's a very distinct possibility. I mean, he's dead in soul, so it's just his body, right? And perhaps in this image, Miquella is trying to race to Godwyn to stop him or save him or something. That's totally, could totally be it. Blah, blah. Infecting the roots. He's doing all sorts of shit, I'm sure. All according, yeah, Ronnie's plan. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, well, some people are speculating it's in Miquella's dream, right?
Resemble Deathroot, evidenced by the falling particles that we can see coming from the tree. We can identify these same particles on the icon of Deathroot, which conveniently also depicts a tree sprouting from a seed. Now, as we all learn throughout the events of the game, the source of the Deathroot is the corrupted corpse of Godwyn, which has some very strange features about it. His legs appear to have turned into a fishtail, and his head into an oyster shape. And here's where things get interesting. Much of the imagery surrounding the spirit world and those who live in death is also closely associated with water, which is why we can see this purple water protruding from Godwyn, and then we have the Tibia Mariners, who are said to be the leaders of those lost in death, and ride across the land on a boat with a single lantern, guiding the lost spirits. This concept of death, spirits, and water might also explain why our spirit horse is named Torrent, but this is all a rabbit hole for another video. I say all that to illustrate that if we do encounter Godwyn in the DLC, especially if it's in this spirit world of the dead, then his form will likely be of an aquatic nature, and I would totally be down for a sea monster Godwyn fight. Now, one thing that I found very interesting from a long time ago was that back during the network test of Elden Ring, there were a lot of differences in the Chinese version than the rest of the world, and one of the most notable was the map. On the Chinese map, if you look out in the ocean, there were lots of depictions of sea monsters. You can see 5 different ones here. We have one depiction of a kraken, 2 different kinds of sea serpents, 1 very large fish over on the right with 2 blowholes, and then one in the top left that I'm unable to discern. And then we have this
in the top left that you're unable to discern. This one? Or this one? Yeah, I don't know what that is. That's cool though. That's weird that they wouldn't have that in it's weird that they wouldn't have that in the English version. Interesting.
with 2 blowholes, and then one in the top left that I'm unable to discern. And then we have this very angry looking fish with 8 pincers. Now these all were ultimately removed from the game, but it does make you realize the sheer lack of ocean themes we see in Elden Ring, given that water appears to play a big role in the lore. And because of that, I do think if we fought Godwyn in the DLC, we can finally see some of these aquatic themes at play.
That'd be wicked.
Now I want to briefly touch on another fight that, if this DLC is about Miquella, then is most definitely going to make an appearance. And that is an alternate form of a Miquella fight, where we fight his alter ego called Saint Trina. And this one has a lot of avenues to explore. I'm not going to go very deep into the lore on this because we've discussed it at nauseum in the other videos, which again I highly recommend. But Saint Trina is described as being a god of dreams. And while this character isn't very present within the current game, they're heavily involved in several cut storylines, which suggests that these concepts and assets in the files will be used at some point.
Hopefully.
And what better time than a DLC about Miquella? So, what would a boss fight with the God of Dreams look like? The Sword of Saint Trina has a description that reads, "Silver sword carried by clerics of Saint Trina, inflicts sleep ailment upon foes. Saint Trina is an enigmatic figure. Some say she is a comely young girl. Others are sure he is a boy. The only certainty is that their appearance was as sudden as their disappearance." And this would make sense if Saint Trina is the young form of Miquella. A young boy with long braided hair and wearing a white robe would easily be mistaken for a girl. But there is a problem. We do have one depiction of Saint Trina. Saint Trina's torch has a description that says, "The carving depicts Saint Trina but in adult form, although somewhat unnervingly." And this is the only time it mentions the adult form, which is very strange. So if we had a fight with Saint Trina, would it be the young form of Miquella in their purity, or
maybe starts young and then their second stage they're an adult? I could see that. I'm just saying. I mean, that's a possibility.
would it be this one-eyed, unnerving figure with these hypnotic tendrils coming from their forehead? Or could this even be the image of Miquella's metamorphosis into that moth form we were discussing?
Yeah.
We really have no way to know. But one thing is for sure, this fight would almost definitely involve a sleep mechanic where Saint Trina attempts to put the player to sleep. I'm honestly surprised we haven't had a single boss that does this yet, so like other things we talked about, the DLC would be a perfect opportunity to introduce this. I also want to mention that the description about them being enigmatic and appearing just as soon as disappearing really makes me think of Orin of the Water in Sekiro, and how she would kind of phase in and out of reality, and you had to catch her during certain movements. And that's a mechanic I really think they should bring back because it was so creative. But regardless, I think a Saint Trina boss fight would be one of the best in the game. Now I want to shoot off some ideas that I think are a little bit less likely, but could also definitely happen in the DLC. The first of which would be a true tree spirit fight. And this is almost entirely speculation, but given that we have ulcerated tree spirits and putrid tree spirits, and our DLC appears to be focusing on a battle between two trees, it makes me think we'll either have some kind of true tree spirit fight, or an even more corrupted version of them. But beyond that, we really don't have much to go off of what this might be, but I would put money on the fact that these guys are going to return in some capacity, whether that's in a full-on upgraded boss fight, or as just another overworld annoyance. Something else I've heard come up a lot in the DLC discussion are potential shadowbound beasts for Miquella and Malenia. We've seen in the lore that two of the four Empyreans, Marika and Ranni, in Malekith and Blythe, but the Empyreans Miquella and Malenia don't have any, or at least don't appear to. It's never really explained in the lore why they don't. Perhaps it's because they're cursed, perhaps they're even regarded as each other's shadows, or they're waiting for us in the DLC. But if we do run into Miquella and Malenia's shadowbound beasts, this could be a potential duo fight. Hopefully it's better than the Godskins, but if they're anything like Garong and Malekith, I don't even want to think about that. That could easily be the hardest fight in the game, but we'll just have to wait and see. But those are just a few of the ideas.
Did we keep track of how many times I died to Malekith? Because I feel like I didn't do too bad against Malekith. I know I wasn't really keeping track of deaths in the game because that stresses me the fuck out. But, I feel like I beat Malekith in a pretty reasonable amount of tries. True sleep mechanic was under... Yeah, I didn't even know about the sleep mechanic until we watched a video that brought it up. I was like, what? I didn't know that.
I'm having that I think we could definitely see in the DLC. One thing we can count on though is that in typical From Software fashion, the DLC bosses are going to be both the best and the hardest in the game. And if it's any of the ones we talked about here, besides maybe the Tree Spirit, then they could certainly live up to that. Either way though, let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below. What bosses do you think we'll see in the DLC? And do you agree with my list? But if you enjoyed today's video, then be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe if you're new around here. And with all that, I will catch you in the next one.
Yeah, you know, that is true though. I feel like a lot of the DLC bosses will probably have something to do with Miquella's story. I mean, it does make sense. That's true, Bridges. I feel like it didn't kill me too many times. I don't remember how many times I died though. Either way. I don't want to go back through all of my friggin' like million-hour long Elden Ring streams. I'm good. But I'm so stoked for the DLC. Oh, it's gonna be so fun. I can't wait till we find out when it comes out though, because I'm gonna have to prepare for it. I would like to beat the Elden Beast before I do the DLC. I don't know how the DLC is gonna be, like how we get to it. Like, do we have to do it in a current playthrough? Do we have to start a new game? Do we have to beat the game to be able to do the DLC? Do we get to use one of our existing characters? Like, I don't know how the DLC is gonna be implemented. Interact with the egg? Probably, yeah. I'm just wondering if I can do it in my current game. But I would believe that. Like, probably enter the dream of Miquella, which I guess means I would have to defeat Mohg. Yeah. Well, the thing is that I only played Dark Souls 3. And did I have... I'm pretty sure I already had the DLCs ready to go, like, when I played the game, or did I not? I don't remember. Because I beat both of the DLCs for Dark Souls 3. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.